You know, not every message lands the same way with every audience. What works for one generation can fall flat with another. But on today's show, we explore how speakers can tailor their message, tone, and delivery to resonate with Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and one of my favorites, baby boomers, without losing authenticity or diluting content. And we've got a guest here who's going to share strategies for reading generational clues and adapting your communication in real time. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Stephanie Mikulasek, is a speaker, executive coach, author, and facilitator of leadership and management development training. She's a former U.S. diplomat with U.S. Aid and the U.S. Department of State. And she's the founder and CEO of The Servant Edge, a company helping organizations and teams prepare their humans for AI integration. I'm going to let Stephanie take it from here. She'll do a better job than me. Stephanie, ready to hear your journey. What's the story
Rob,
with you?
thank you. I am so glad to be here. What a privilege to be on the show with you and to have a chance to talk with your listeners about something I care quite a bit about. I thought I would start with sort of my aha moment when I figured out how I need and why we need to speak across generations. So I'm going to take you and your listeners back to a morning in a place called Hwange National Park. This is in the northwest part of Zimbabwe. I was leading one of my intensive leadership immersion experiences, something I do at the Servant Edge. And I had 6 people ranging in age from mid-20s up to about 60. So you can see the generations right away. We were on a walking safari. So picture mist still rising off the veld, insects buzzing, the day just waking up. And like any mixed generation group, everyone walked with different expectations, different energy, very different ideas about how the morning should go. So about an hour in, we've not seen a single animal. My Gen Z participant, done taking selfies with her Instagram, kind of wondering if something was wrong. My millennials were wondering if the experience would be worth it. My Gen X folks, well, they're rewriting the itinerary. And my one baby boomer in the group, politely waiting, hoping nature would eventually cooperate, right? And that's when everything changed, Rob. My guide stops abruptly, pointed down to a fresh lion print, and before my brain caught up, I felt the sound. 2 lionesses growling, deep and angry, just ahead of us. We had unknowingly walked between 2 mothers and their cubs.
Oh, boy.
Yep. In that moment, my job was not just to lead. It was to speak in a way I felt I could get to everybody's message so that they could hear me. Shall I go on?
Yeah, I'm dying to, yeah. Keep going. You've got bonus time on this one. You can't leave us there.
All right. So I had one participant who was trying to bolt. I had 2 frozen in fear. I had another hiding behind a tree. I had another trying to take a photo. I am not kidding. And yet another one who's screaming in fear, right? I didn't need a slide deck. I didn't need a framework. I needed clarity, alignment, and a message that landed with all of them at once. So I used universal language, short, clear instructions, grounded, steady tone, no panic, and a constant awareness of how each person was interpreting the moment. So the short answer is we got to safety, but I got a big insight out of that. And that's what I'd like to share with you right now. Different generations don't just hear differently, they interpret differently. And if you want your message to land across ages, you have to know how to speak in ways they can receive.
Okay. And I want to dig into that. But I'm curious about something because I saw that you speak in multiple countries, matter of, dozens and dozens. we're breaking down the different generations. How about culturally? Do you notice sort of cultural differences? Do the generations kind of, I know I'm asking multiple questions here, but I'll give you some room on this one. So let me make it clear. Two questions. One, do you notice the generational differences are similar in the different countries? And do you notice cultural differences appearing almost like generational in different countries? Riddle me that one.
No, these are great questions. And the short answer is there's commonalities and there's differences,
Okay.
right? So commonalities. Our Gen Zer friends, so these are folks, these are the young folks that were born after 1997. So these are basically your 2000 births, right? So, generally speaking, across most cultures, these are our emotional listeners. All of this generation grew up when information is infinite, it's algorithmic, it's immediate, right? So,
Right.
that generation is really looking at what does this mean for me? And I see that across cultures and across countries because you're spot on. I've been all over the place. Then I look at your baby boomers. Let me jump all the way to the very end, right? These folks tend to be very structural listeners across the board. Their filter is more of honor what got us here, right? So they're looking at logic, sequencing, respect for context. They also prefer calm over quick pivots. And that's a big challenge, particularly in overseas environments where you might even have language differences. And you've got Gen Zers who want to move really quick. And then you got the boomers who need a little bit slower pacing anyway. And you're trying to modulate for that. I'd offer another perspective on that too, another insight that is very true that no matter what, it's about how you tailor your delivery without compromising your integrity, regardless of the cultural mindset that might be in the room or the age that's in the room.
Right. Right. Well, and I would think that that would kind of erode your authenticity. It would almost be like you're playing up to a particular generation or almost performing for that generation. I think we've got to be who we are. I'm curious. Let me stay on it for a second. You know, because I'm obviously when I'm really queuing into the boomer part just to see. Well, that part I know. Let me see if I fit that mold. I'm very process oriented. I don't know if that's my generation or if that's Xerox, because I worked for Xerox for a decade and everything was a process. But when you have a process, you have a way of measuring things. When you can measure it, you can fix it. I'm just a believer in that. But now I'm sort of scratching my head going, was that Xerox or was it just a bunch of boomers in a room, wearing white shirts?
No, actually, you are well representing the boomer population. I'm a what you'd call an old Gen Xer, so we're
Mm-hmm.
not too far apart. So boomers are structural listeners, which is another way of saying process,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're looking for logic, sequencing, okay, credibility. They want to know context. They're looking at how does this fit far ahead. So we might be having a conversation and you might be thinking, okay, how is this going to fit into next year's strategic direction, right? And how am
Right.
I going to logically get there? That's process. So you're
Mm-hmm.
spot on.
Okay. All right. How about this one? And some of these things, I, I don't get anxious very often, but I'm getting anxious, which is a good thing because I'm in an area that I'm not as comfortable with right now because I've just made certain assumptions. I mean, let's face it, Stephanie, everyone's like me. You know that. So, but I've always broken down. We know as presenters that one of the most important things is we have to address what's in it for the audience. And for me, that's always never been broken down generational. It's been broken down structurally of, well, I'm going to tell you what's in it for basically the worker bees, okay, the grunts. This, what I'm going to teach is going to get you out of here before 5 o'clock in the evening. I'm going to work on the decision influencers. How's this going to help the company? I'm going to work on the people who are probably writing my paycheck. How's this going to help the company, as a whole, not just us on the job, but as a whole. So I've got the job, I've got the company, I've got the individual, feeling pretty good, like I'm spreading that with them out nicely. But am I missing something generationally there?
So first, let me offer you a perspective that you alluded to earlier that I want to really zero in on. when you're invited to be a speaker,
Hmm.
you are not a performer. This is exactly right. And every generation will smell that out in different ways. You are a leader.
Right.
You are on the stage. You've just given permission to be a leader. As a leader, your job is to help translate the messages that you're trying to get across, whether that's for the reorg or the organization or whatever it is, the topic, in such a way that every generation can best hear your messaging. And each generation has a different filter. And if you don't speak to the different filters, you're going to create anxiety. You're going to create disengagement. You're not going to reach the audience in a way that's going to actually interpret. So it's not just hearing what you say, it's interpreting what you say, which means you're also a translator up front.
Right. Right. Well said. How about so how are we going to read these people? I'm in front of a room, and I don't like. No one's going to give me their age walking in. Even those whiffums that I threw at you, I always tell people that it's not written on their forehead. I don't know who wants to help them on the job more than to help them on their house. So, I don't know. I just know if I hit all three, I've got the room covered. But what are some clues that we could use, a presenter could use to basically try and read the room rather than trying to figure out somebody's age?
Absolutely. I love that question. So I'm going to offer you a framework that my company, The Servant Edge, developed called the Transformative Servant Model. And I'm going to walk you through the first 3 of 4 parts that will help give some structure to this, my fellow baby boomer, right?
Okay.
So this is going to answer some of that. And then we can get into some specific tools if that's interesting as well. So first is alignment. All right. So I mentioned this earlier. It is essential that you speak from your center. Folks can smell it no matter what generation if you're faking it. That's the bottom line. So before you get on stage, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, am I aligned with the message I'm delivering? Right? So if you're not, pause, stop, because your Gen Zers are going to call it out. Your Gen Xers are going to disengage. Your boomers are going to distrust you, right? And your millennials are going to question your purpose. Again, this is their filter. Alignment is your first stage of credibility. Okay? If you're not grounded in who you are and why you're speaking, your audience will know it immediately. So that's first, alignment. Second, awareness. This is getting to what you just said about knowing who's in the room, but I'm going to give it a little different twist because you're right. As speakers, we're trained on this, right? Who's in my room? Who's my audience? So I'm going to add, what pressures is your audience carrying? What language do they trust? And I don't mean by, is it an English or a Spanish language invent? I'm talking about what's the norms here that I need to make sure I'm meshing with, right? What do they need from you emotionally, practically, structurally? So again, awareness is understanding how that audience is going to interpret you. So let me give you 3 questions you can ask yourself in this space, awareness. What does this audience want to feel? That's especially for your Gen Zers. What pressures are they carrying? It's especially for your millennials and some Gen Xers. What generational based listening habits are in the room? So it's tackling all 3 of those components that we were just talking about. And then finally, action. So this is now you're actually delivering this. You're tailoring your delivery, not your integrity, right? Because we are leaders. We've got to make sure we're translating our message well so that our audience can hear what it is that we're trying to say. So we use our tools, tone, pacing, story. The opening story I gave you, there were moments I talked fast. There were moments I talked slow. I got to a point. Right? You could see the logic where we were going. It was literally an example for your listeners about what I'm talking about in delivery.
Right.
It's not changing what you believe. It's only how you communicate it.
Okay. I love this. But how do we get at the answers to those questions? In other words, sometimes those are some interesting questions. Do we, when we're signing up for the gig, I'm a corporate guy, so I'm typically working with a Fortune 500 company. When I'm signing up, I'm getting a sense of the audience. Is it a pre-call letter or conversation? I mean, I love what you just told me. I'm just trying to figure out. I think being introduced, stepping on the stage, and thinking I'm going to read it from there while I'm opening up and telling this great story that's got pitch, pace, and pause in it. I don't have room for it. I'm figuring I've got to get that homework done before I get up there. How?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. So one easy approach, and then I think I'm going to give you a couple tools to really hone in on that. One is you engage that person you're talking to and ask who's in the room, right? That's a pretty simple, straightforward one. Are these C-suite executives or, well, actually, some C-suites are millennials as opposed to just maybe being the Gen Xers and the boomers. But are these new managers, right? So you're going to have some idea, or is this just a broad mix? What I recommend and what I do in practice is I employ a couple key tools, and that way you don't have to worry so much about, gosh, how, I don't really know what generation these people are. I mean, heck, I can't tell anymore if someone's 22 or 32. They kind of all look the same at this point in my life. So given that every generation likes a different pace, the first tool I would offer to you as you're designing any speech, even if you can't get information about who's in that room, it's called the 3-tempo method. Okay. It's really simple. 3-tempo method. Part of your speech, you're going to speak fast. Those are the Gen Zers. They want energy and they want novelty. Okay. Part of that speech, you're going to speak kind of at a medium pace. They want a structured story. They're listening for insight. So I have a really fast moment, and then I'm going to bring it down just a little bit because now I'm talking with a little more of a structured story. And then I need to really slow down my pace, get into the gravitas of my message, my key point. And in one fell swoop, I've just engaged all my audiences through these 3 tempos.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. The good news about what you just did to me is, even if I wasn't trying to appease multiple generations, I should be doing that anyway. Because I refer to it sometimes as like a pitcher. You can't just keep throwing fastballs. We change our pace because it's more interesting. We move our pitch because it's more interesting. I actually think one of the most underplayed moves that presenters make, because they get nervous and their clock runs too fast, is pausing. There's a lot of credibility that comes in, particularly when we're getting a question from the audience. I may have that answer. I may internally be almost rolling my eyes. That one again. I haven't heard that question in 3 days. But to put a pause on it and to sell the fact that, what an interesting question. So those are moves that speakers should be making, I hope anyway, just to increase the interest from the audience.
I hope so. And let me give you a second tool that hopefully your listeners are doing, but often is missed. And to your point, the first one I do hope everyone's doing, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more context.
Well, now we have another reason to do it. Absolutely. I love it.
Exactly. So the next tool is what I call multi-layer messaging. Okay. So what, why, how, and why. We're going to talk about that in what I mean by multi-layer messaging. So when you're speaking, as you're drafting your speech, memorizing your talking points, you want to focus and make sure you include these things: what it means emotionally, why it matters for growth, how it works in practice, and where it fits in the bigger picture. If you can address each of those 4 points intentionally, you're going to be able to reach generations. It might be easier for your listeners too. The way that I do this is I say, okay, what this means for you right now in the middle of my speech, right? You're hitting the Gen Zers. They're all about meaning. Okay. Or here's how you can use this to grow. Okay. That's my millennial, very purpose oriented. Or here's the strategy and the rationale behind it. Now I'm getting at more of my Gen Xers and my boomers. So it's subtle, but so many speakers I find forget this multi-layer messaging point where it really is what it means emotionally, why it matters for growth, how it works in practice, and where does it fit in the bigger picture.
Yeah. And I'm not sure which one this falls into, but I don't know if it's generational or just people who have attention deficit, but frequently I will finish and encourage people to finish the longer stories which we know we tell so well, and everyone should have the answer to what we're after here. But we've told it a lot, and it's a lot simpler to us than the audience. A good technique is to say, "And I tell you this story because." Which basically says, just in case you didn't catch the moral of this story, because it went on for 2.5 minutes, this is what I wanted you to run out with. But we do that, and I'm not sure, again, whether I'm hitting generations or I'm just hitting people that, regardless of generations, can get lost in a story every now and then. There are a lot of distractions in that room.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. And that, just that simple point, to put a real pin on that, you're actually allowing some of your audience to hear, to interpret what it is that you're saying.
Right.
Because your Gen Zers are going right now on what they feel. They may not even hear that, but they're going, "Ooh, I feel really good. Boy, that was, I got that." Right. Or my millennials saying, I'm already thinking about the purpose of this and what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter. You just hit another part of your audience.
Yeah. Well, all millennials feel that. Don't worry, I'm not going to finish that sentence because I'm just transitioning to a question. Don't you hate stuff like that? But I was going to intentionally set us up for some ridiculous myth, because there's myths all over the place with these various generations. I don't fear the generations as much because I don't climb into all the myths. I figure, look at the conversation we're having so far. I'm mopping up, I'm cleaning up, I'm taking notes on this end. But most of my instincts to just communicate effectively and intelligently are not lost on any of the generations, quite frankly. But there's some myths out there. Let's stamp out one or two of them. What is a typical generational myth that maybe presenters in particular might fall into?
That's a great question. I'm going to pick on my friends, the Gen Zers, because I think something I hear more than anything is my Gen Zers are disengaged. They're entitled. They don't really want to work. There's just sort of all this muck around the Gen Zers, which, by the way, every generation does that with the newest generation, right? So I want to put something on that. So Gen Zers, in my research and experience, says one thing. Gen Zers are actually calling everybody else to task on this whole idea. Do you really believe in work-life balance, for example? Or, hey, data points not just include spreadsheets, but it includes gut feelings. It includes my somatic intelligence, my body intelligence, my emotional intelligence. See all of me. Don't just see whether or not I hit enough boxes at the end of the day, right? This is very different than boomers and older Gen X's like me who, I stay at work until the job is done. I don't care if I had a dinner engagement with my spouse or with my kids. I got stuff to do here at work. The Gen Zers are saying, well, but you just talked this morning at the staff meeting about work-life balance and how it's important, right? So when we're speaking to that audience, this is why I'm emphasizing so strongly, we have got to attune to those Gen Zers. They want to hear what we have to say, and they are smart and they're innovative and they know how to use technology like nobody else above them, right? They're also very, very savvy at smelling out disingenuity. They're very good at smelling out whether or not this person is real or not. Are they just performing? Or is that somebody who's really got something to teach me because I feel comfortable around them? I feel like they have something to teach me and I want to listen. So maybe that's one myth I can help just disentangle just a little bit. They are worth having around our boardroom tables and our entry-level positions. They've got a lot to offer and they are brilliant to speak to because a lot of times those are the ones that are most engaging in a speech.
Yeah. Yeah. As a guy, let's step off the keynote stage where we're there to inspire, motivate, entertain, and teach a few things. And I'm not putting the keynoters down. I keynote all the time. But I have to remind my client, I'm not creating any cultural changes within your organization with 500 people in the audience to hear me speak for an hour. So it's going to be, we're going to have a great time and learn a few things. But workshops are different. Workshops were really there. I feel the responsibility is, no, we don't want to leave with a good idea or two. We want to leave with here comes the boomer. I mean, some sort of process that we can use and try and do our jobs better. Okay. But I think, and I hope this isn't generational, I think it's just more responsibility of a trainer, of a speaker, which is I don't want to just teach you what I know. I'd like you to implement it if you could, okay? Because ultimately, I think that's really what I should be almost compensated on, not the performance, the results. So when we look at generational divides, are there any differences in terms of how we inspire them to action, as opposed to just inspiring them to pay attention? Because I guess it's something in the tail end of my career, and I'm so much more interested in implementation than I was maybe earlier on, where I wanted to put on a good show.
I love this question so much. And in fact, that's the whole root of the transformative servant model. So let me give you, I actually prefer workshops because they're much more interactive and they're much more action oriented.
We're getting something accomplished here.
Yeah. Exactly. We want to see results. And at the end of the
Right.
day, it's great to have a good speech, but we want actually somebody to do something with what we have to offer, right?
Agreed.
So here's a key question that I love asking smaller groups or workshop kind of settings, right? The question is this: what's landing for you right now? This is actually the fourth stage in the transformative servant model that I didn't talk about. It's called absorption. So this is a moment of reflection. So I have just said, I might have spoken something about here's what's going on and how it aligns with our company values. Okay, that's an alignment, awareness. And this is going to be the impact on the situation we have at hand. That's another way of talking about awareness. Okay. Here's the actions I'm going to take, and I'd like you to take. And here's how I'm going to support you and you're going to support me. And then the last question is, how's this landing for you? What's making sense? What's not making sense? When you ask just that one question, what's landing for you right now, you're going to get 4 different answers depending on who's sitting at the table. And all of them are rich fodder for actually developing a result that's going to stick, right? Actually going to see results. So really quickly, your Gen Zers, no surprise, they're going to give you an answer of, well, that feels really good to me. How it's landing to me, it really feels good. Millennials, they're going to talk to you about opportunities. I already see opportunities ahead that we can employ what you just said, right? My Gen Xers, very practical. Yes, practically speaking, I can imagine how we might put this together. And my boomers are going to go right to process. They're going to go right to structure. They're going to go right to yes. And as we look ahead at the strategy and we're going to modify our structure, our process.
I can use 6 of these, and I've got them all circled. Got it. Right.
Exactly right. Yeah. So it's workshops are great because you're right. You can see results. And a speaker, you're not just a leader in that moment. A lot of times you're almost facilitating an unspoken conversation happening in the room.
Right. Yeah, I never want to lose that. Let's put our cards on the table, because a lot of speakers are listening. I understand the keynotes are easier. They're easier on the body. They're easier on the family. They're easier on everything. It's easier, and you don't see me turning down a whole lot of them. But I would encourage people to remember, particularly the speakers here, that most companies that are asking for a keynote, if you give them the best keynote they've ever seen in their life, they'll ask you about workshops. So start building them. And I'm with you. I get a lot more satisfaction, a lot more exhausted, but a lot more satisfaction getting into the trenches with 20 or less and sitting on some role plays and watching them skin their knees, but not telling them how to swing a golf club, going out on the course with them and playing a couple holes.
That's exactly right. You said it so well. And I would even add a lot of times too, it's hard to get into keynotes. And so I've seen some speakers over my years where they may not want to do a workshop or be on a panel. And how many panels have we been on? But the truth is, not only are those often more satisfying, like you're saying, but those also can lead to keynotes, right? It's pretty rare to get just right into a keynote, but especially if you're new and you're starting this out.
Yeah, what a fabulous point, because you're right. If you've been in the business for 30 years, you might find some keynotes coming your way. But if you are with an audience for 16 hours and you do your job, they will never forget you. And you're right. That's how you get trusted with 1 hour in front of the entire company for, some usually significant income. All right, last question for you. We'll play on your something landing on the audience today theme. Okay. If you wanted one thing, and I know we've got different generations listening, but one thing that landed on the audience today in our conversation, you and me, what would you want them to walk away with?
Oh, I love this question. I want to emphasize a commonality, what every generation is looking for. A sense of belonging, a sense that they matter, a sense that they're contributing, and to feel safe with the person that's speaking to them. We're actually talking about creating an environment where everybody is part of the conversation. And when you speak from alignment, when you're speaking from awareness, and when you're speaking from action, you don't just talk across generations, you're actually connecting and engaging with them.
Right. Well said. Listen, it's been delightful. It's funny, Stephanie and I have spoken twice. Well, right before we started here, and then we spoke for a few minutes before. That went a little long because I can have a conversation with you every day. Really terrific content. I just, look, like I said, when I'm taking notes, that's a good sign. I appreciate it. Boy, you pegged me as a boomer right across the board. But one of the things I'm walking away with is, I assume because that's the way I was trained, schooled, and bred and fed within corporate America, that everybody feels and thinks the way I do, and that I'm almost smirking, going, "Wait till they hear the word process again, they're gonna love me." But not so fast there, Rob. Anyway, so many good points. How do people get a hold of you?
Oh, thank you. The best way is go to theservantedge.com. theservantedge.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name, Stephanie Mikulasek. It might be easier just to go to The Servant Edge on LinkedIn, or just send me an email, support@theservantedge.com. That's the easiest way.
And if you do, she responds. I can tell you it's
I will
true.
respond immediately.
Wonderful meeting you. Terrific conversation. I rarely have guests on more than once, but we're going to talk again sometime at some point, you and me. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. You're just terrific.
Thank you, Rob. Right back at you. Privileged to be here.
Wonderful. Well, folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.